I should have known something was wrong the moment I pulled into Meadowbrook Estates and saw 3 women standing in my driveway with their arms crossed. They looked like they'd been waiting for me, positioned in a perfect line, like some sort of suburban welcoming committee from hell. The one in the middle, a platinum blonde with yoga pants that probably cost more than my car payment, stepped forward first. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm Patricia, HOA president. These are my associates, Deborah and Susan. We're the compliance committee, and we need to discuss several violations we've observed at your property." I'd only been living here for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I hadn't even finished unpacking all my boxes yet, but apparently I'd already committed multiple infractions against the sacred rules of Meadowbrook Estates. Patricia handed me a manila folder, thick with papers, while Deborah and Susan flanked her like designer-clad bodyguards. The folder contained 7 violation notices. 7. My lawn was 1/4 inch too long. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black, apparently more charcoal than true black. My car had been parked on the street for 3 hours, which exceeded the 2-hour maximum. The list went on. Each violation came with a $50 fine. I tried to be reasonable. "Look, I just moved in. I didn't even know about some of these rules. Can we maybe start with a warning?" Patricia's smile could have frozen lava. The HOA bylaws are available online, and were included in your closing documents. Ignorance isn't an excuse. The fines are due within 14 days. Cash or check only. If you're enjoying this story of suburban warfare, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World for more tales of epic revenge. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this one ends. Over the next month, I learned that Patricia, Deborah, and Susan operated like a well-oiled machine of neighborhood tyranny. Patricia was the mastermind, the HOA president who knew every bylaw and loophole. Deborah was the enforcer, driving around the neighborhood at all hours with a clipboard, documenting any potential violation. Susan was the social warfare specialist, spreading rumors and organizing the other residents against anyone who dared challenge the committee. I paid the initial fines and tried to comply with everything. I hired a professional lawn service to ensure my grass stayed at exactly 2½ inches. I repainted my mailbox with paint that matched the approved sample card exactly. I never parked on the street. But it didn't matter. The violations kept coming. My fence was installed 3 inches too far forward. My outdoor light fixture wasn't on the approved list, even though it was identical to 6 other houses on the street. I'd placed my trash cans out at 6:58 a.m. on collection day, but the bylaws specified 7 a.m. exactly. Each violation came with more fines, more certified letters, more threats of legal action. The breaking point came when they went after my garden. I'd planted tomatoes and herbs in my backyard, completely invisible from the street. But somehow, Deborah had taken photos, probably by trespassing on my property, and the committee declared it a violation. According to some obscure bylaw from 1998, vegetable gardens were classified as agricultural use, which wasn't permitted in residential zones. You need to remove all vegetable plants within 48 hours, Patricia informed me, standing once again in my driveway with her 2 accomplices. The fine for agricultural violations is $500, plus $100 per day until compliance is achieved. I'd had enough. This is insane. There are tomato plants in my backyard. Nobody can even see them. Susan stepped forward, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We've also received complaints from your neighbors about the smell of your composting. It's affecting their property values." I didn't have a compost pile. They were just making things up now. That night, I made some phone calls. You see, what Patricia and her committee didn't know was that before I moved to Meadowbrook Estates, I'd spent 15 years as a real estate attorney specializing in property law and HOA litigation. I'd taken early retirement at 42 after a particularly successful case, and I'd moved here looking for peace and quiet. Instead, I'd found 3 women who had no idea they'd just declared war on someone who knew every legal trick in the book. I started by requesting every HOA document going back to the community's founding in 1994. Every meeting minute, every financial record, every election result. By law, they had to provide these within 10 business days. Patricia tried to delay, but one letter from my former law firm convinced her to comply immediately. What I found was fascinating. The HOA election that made Patricia president had some irregularities. The bylaws required a quorum of 51% of homeowners for a valid election, but only 43% had voted. Technically, Patricia had never been legally elected. Everything she'd done as president for the past 2 years could be challenged. But that was just the beginning. I discovered that Deborah's home business, a boutique consultation service she ran from her house, violated the same commercial use restrictions they tried to enforce on others. She'd never applied for a variance or paid the required business operation fees to the HOA. Susan's violations were even better. She'd enclosed her patio without architectural approval, installed a hot tub that exceeded the noise ordinances, and had been renting out her pool house on short-term rental websites, which was explicitly prohibited. But I didn't stop there. I pulled the county records and found something beautiful. The HOA had been systematically overcharging residents on their assessments for 3 years. The bylaws capped annual increases at 3%, but they'd been raising them by 5 to 7%. Across 140 homes, that was serious money, potentially criminal mismanagement. I spent 3 months building my case, documenting everything. During that time, I complied with every single violation notice, no matter how ridiculous. I paid every fine with a smile. I let them think they'd won, that they'd broken me into submission. Patricia got bolder. She started having Deborah inspect my property weekly, finding new violations that didn't exist. Susan organized a petition to have me removed from the neighborhood for being a nuisance. They held special HOA meetings specifically to discuss my property, without inviting me as required by law. Then I discovered the perfect final piece. The original developer of Meadowbrook Estates had retained ownership of one small parcel of land, a quarter-acre lot at the neighborhood entrance, where they'd planned to build a fancy entrance monument. They'd never gotten around to it, and that parcel, technically still part of the HOA but undeveloped, had been forgotten for decades. I found the developer's heir, now an elderly woman living in Florida, and made her an offer she couldn't refuse. I bought that quarter-acre parcel for triple its assessed value. And here's the beautiful part. According to the original HOA declaration, ownership of that parcel came with permanent, irrevocable voting rights equal to 15% of the entire HOA. It was meant to ensure the developer could protect their vision for the community. They just never used it. I now controlled 15% of all HOA votes automatically, and I own property that predated many of the current restrictions. The original covenants gave that parcel exemptions from almost every rule Patricia and her committee had been enforcing. I spent another month quietly talking to other homeowners, the ones who'd been victimized by Patricia's regime. I showed them the financial irregularities, the illegal election, the selective enforcement of rules. I didn't ask them to do anything. I just made sure they knew the truth. The annual HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Tuesday in June. Every homeowner received notice, as required. But this time, I made sure they had a reason to show up. I'd let it slip through the neighborhood grapevine that there would be some interesting revelations about how their HOA fees had been spent. The community center was packed. Every seat was filled, with people standing along the walls. Patricia, Deborah, and Susan sat at the front table, looking annoyed at the turnout. Usually, these meetings attracted maybe a dozen people. Patricia called the meeting to order. "We have a lot of routine business tonight, so if we could keep comments brief." I stood up. "Point of order. Before we proceed with routine business, I'm calling for an immediate vote to remove the current board for cause and hold emergency elections." The room went silent. Patricia's face turned red. "You can't do that. That's not on the agenda." I smiled. "Actually, according to Article 7, Section 3 of the bylaws, any homeowner with at least 10% voting rights can call for an emergency vote to remove board members for cause. I have 15% through my ownership of the developer parcel at the entrance, which I purchased 3 months ago. The original declaration grants that parcel permanent 15% voting rights." You could have heard a pin drop. Deborah frantically flipped through her copy of the bylaws, trying to find some way to refute what I just said. She couldn't. It was right there in black and white. That's not possible," Patricia stammered. "That parcel was, we didn't know." "Ignorance isn't an excuse," I said, echoing her own words back to her. "I believe those were your exact words to me. Now, as for cause, I have documentation that the election that placed you in office was invalid due to lack of quorum. I have evidence of selective enforcement of violations. I have proof that you've been overcharging homeowners on assessments for 3 years, totaling approximately $87,000 in illegal fees. And I have documentation that each member of the current board is in violation of multiple HOA rules that you've chosen not to enforce against yourselves. I distributed packets to every homeowner in attendance. Each packet contained copies of every violation I documented, every financial irregularity, every piece of evidence I gathered. I'd even included photos of Deborah's commercial business operations, Susan's unpermitted patio enclosure and hot tub, and Patricia's own property violations, including a shed that was 8 square feet over the size limit." The room erupted. Homeowners who'd been terrorized for years were shouting questions. Some were demanding refunds. Others were calling for the police. Patricia tried to gavel the meeting back to order, but nobody was listening to her anymore. "This is slander," Patricia shouted over the chaos. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually, I can," I said calmly. "I've already filed complaints with the State Attorney General's office regarding the financial irregularities. I've also submitted a formal challenge to your election with the county clerk. But here's what I'm prepared to offer. Resign immediately, all 3 of you, and I won't pursue criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. You'll need to pay back the excess fees you collected, but I'll give you a payment plan option." Susan was crying. Deborah looked like she might be sick. But Patricia's face had gone from red to purple. "You think you can just come into this neighborhood and destroy everything we built?" Patricia hissed. "We were maintaining standards, protecting property values." "No," I said quietly. "You were abusing your power to bully people. You selectively enforced rules to punish anyone you didn't like while ignoring your own violations. You turned this HOA into your personal fiefdom. That ends tonight." The vote wasn't even close. 112 homeowners voted to remove the board immediately. Only 3 voted against: Patricia, Deborah, and Susan themselves. My 15% developer vote wasn't even necessary, but it made the final tally devastatingly lopsided. But I wasn't finished. There's one more item of business. As the owner of the developer parcel, I'm exercising my rights under the original declaration to propose amendments to the HOA bylaws. Specifically, I'm proposing we eliminate 70% of the current restrictions, implement mandatory rotation of board positions, require board members to undergo annual financial audits, and establish a homeowner advocacy committee with the power to overturn board decisions. The amendments passed overwhelmingly. Then came my favorite part. Finally, regarding the developer parcel I now own at the neighborhood entrance. I'm going to develop it, as is my right under the original covenants. The old bylaws don't apply to this lot, remember? I'm planning to build something really special. Patricia's eyes narrowed. You can't. What are you going to build? I pulled out the architectural plans I had drawn up. A community garden, free for all residents to use, with a special section dedicated to tomato plants and herbs. I'm calling it the Patricia Compliance Memorial Garden. There will be a plaque crediting you three for inspiring it. The room erupted in applause and laughter. Patricia stood there, shaking, as she realized what had happened. I'd used her own rules, her own bylaws, her own system against her. Everything I'd done was completely legal, following every procedure to the letter. I'd turned the very mechanisms of control she'd weaponized against residents into the instruments of her downfall. But the final twist was yet to come. I held up one more document. Oh, and one last thing. Since the board is now dissolved and new elections will take 3 weeks to organize, we need an interim administrator. According to the emergency provisions in the bylaws, that defaults to the homeowner with the largest voting stake in the HOA. That would be me, with my 15% developer vote. Patricia's face went white as she understood the full implications. For the next 3 weeks, I would have complete control of the HOA. I could review every violation they'd ever issued, refund every unfair fine, and investigate every decision they'd made. I could access all their files, all their communications, all their dirty little secrets. As my first official act, I continued, I'm nullifying every violation issued in the past 2 years pending a comprehensive review for selective enforcement. I'm also initiating a full forensic audit of the HOA finances, to be conducted by an independent accounting firm. The 3 of you will be contacted by the auditors. I suggest you get attorneys. Deborah was openly crying now. Susan had her head in her hands. But Patricia just stared at me with pure hatred and shock, finally understanding that the quiet new neighbor she tried to bully into submission had systematically dismantled her entire operation using nothing but her own rules, legal procedures, and documentation. You can't, Patricia whispered. This isn't legal? I finished for her. Oh, but it is. Every single thing I've done is completely by the book. Your book, Patricia. The bylaws you've been using as weapons. I just read them more carefully than you did. And unlike you, when I enforce rules, I enforce them on everyone equally, including myself. The look on Patricia's face as she realized she'd been completely, utterly, and legally destroyed by her own system was absolutely priceless. If you love this triple Karen takedown, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World. Drop a comment and let me know which part of this revenge was your favorite. Trust me, you don't want to miss the next story. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best revenge is just following the rules better than the people who made them.